Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I got another It's Complicated channel video. This one is called Forced to Simp. Let's watch it together. And before we get into this, I think we are forced to simp. It's called family law. All right, let's watch this.
Believe it or not, whatever race, whatever religion you are, you need sex. You want sex. That's gonna make you happy.
Men are weak at the end of the day, so it's really all up to them. So, what do you want? You wanna be celibate, or you're gonna have to cave in at some point to what we want.
Women have way more options than men.
Do you think men should withhold attention and resources when they're unhappy with women?
They can, but just to let you know, she'll find that attention somewhere else.
Well, yeah, she'll find it from another guy or another simp.
Do you believe that sex is a need or a want?
It's a want. It's a need.
I would say it's definitely a want. You don't have to have it to survive.
Like, that's biologically, like, explained. Like, we came from animals, and that's what they do. They fuck. To recreate themselves, so that's a need.
Sex is a need in a different way. First of all, sex is a need in order to populate the earth, and that is what we are here on this earth to do. So it is a need in that way. However, men's desires are not a need.
You know, upon hearing it at first, I'm always more inclined to say want, but after a long enough timeline, I think it is a need. You know, if you go without it for a long enough time, that's what's going to be on your mind, and you're going to be figuring out how to get it. And definitely men who get sex more regularly might say it's not so much of a need because they're not thinking about it, but for a guy who hasn't got it in a long time, they're going to be like, I need sex.
Is it more of a need or a want for men or for women?
I would say, honestly, I think it's about equal. I mean, they peak at different times, right? So men in their 20s, they need it more. They want it more. Women in their 40s.
Even if it was just an urge, why are men often shamed for wanting it when it's biology?
Ooh, I don't know.
What if we shame women for having periods?
Then you're horrible. That's rude. That's like a normal thing. Like,
I mean, isn't it equally a normal thing for men to want sex?
no,
Why not?
I don't know.
It is such a weird thing because it's like if you're a guy and you say that you want sex, like you will be immediately demonized, you know, like you're just this villain who only wants to use people for their bodies. It kind of reminds me of like the body count argument, you know, like does body count matter? And, you know, a lot of times we focus on women and think, well, if a woman's had too many partners, then, you know, she's ruined or whatever. But body count also matters for guys or lack thereof. So if you don't have a body count and you're like 30, you're going to get shamed for it. So it's weird. Guys get shamed for not having experience in sex, and they get shamed for wanting sex at the same time. So you just get beat down if you're at the bottom of the totem pole like that.
If sex wasn't a need for men, why would men invest so much time, effort, and money and risk so much liability in order to get it?
I mean, because it's a need. It says it right there.
What else do men invest that much time and effort into?
Masturbating?
I guess that makes sense. I mean, if you're not able to get sex like that and you have the urge or the need for, you know, for sex, then guys will tend to use masturbation as a tool for that. My own personal beliefs, you know, I'm pretty extreme when it comes to this. I think porn and masturbation is bad. That doesn't mean I think it should be illegal. I think people should, you know, legally be able to procure it or produce it or whatever. I just think it's bad and poisonous. And if you stay away from that, then I think you're more likely to figure out how to get sex, because the button that gives you a hit and a rush is not right next to you. It's like on the other side of a valley. So I'm not a supporter advocate of porn or masturbation.
What else do men invest that much time and effort into?
money.
Money to impress women?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the money thing is interesting, you know, because a guy will go through so much in order to get, you know, a nice car or status in a career or whatever it is, a house, in order to be able to attract a woman. When you look at a lot of talking points of the manosphere, there's so much emphasis on like becoming a high value man. And, you know, you got Andrew Tate over here selling you Hustlers University so you can get like a Bugatti and stuff. And at a certain point, it's like men spend so much time on that just to become a high value target for some woman to consume.
If sex is a need, why is it sold at a luxury price?
There is a market. Like there was a need. Like when you see that there is a need, there is a market, and they need that.
So it sells. Sex sells.
Exactly.
So when it comes to the current dating market, would you agree that women have more options now than ever, while men have more competition now than ever?
I think it's the other way around.
I think it's definitely a true statement. I mean, especially nowadays, right? Like there's been a lot of talk of the rise of the loneliness epidemic for men, and women can procure sex a lot easier. The competition for women tends to be on the other side of that equation when it comes to trying to lock down a guy to marry or find like a provisioner, you know, basically a state certified simp, right? That's where the family law comes in. But they tend to have a high degree of competition when it comes to getting, you know, this small 1%er amount of high value men that they're trying to get. But most normal guys have a lot of competition when they're trying to get a woman.
Do have more options than ever. That does mean men have competitions already.
Well, women want the top 1% of the 1%, and they think that it's just everywhere.
The majority of men that usually, you know, got money, power, stuff like that, got the more options to choose any girl they want.
See, I think she said the majority of men. The majority of men that have money, power, and options. Let's hear that again.
The majority of men that usually, you know, got money, power, stuff like that, got the more options to choose any girl they want, because...
See, and that's not true what she said. The majority of men are not this high-value, powerful, rich, status-enriched guy. Most men are average or below average.
Women come along with respect and success. So for an average man to find a good woman, he sometimes has to settle for women that are gonna do whatever the fuck they want to do because they're not maybe the alpha.
Yeah, see, I mean, okay, I think she got it better at the end there. If you're an average guy, I mean, you're stuck in the situation where you're improving yourself as much as you can. You're trying to find a good woman in order to complement you and hopefully for marriage and stuff. But in the U.S., it's becoming harder and harder to find women that are going to make good marriage material. I mean, let's just be honest. And then what ends up happening is after a long enough time, one of these other women who've been trying to get one of these high value guys, quote unquote, they start coming back down the pyramid because the clock's ticking for them. And then one of these normal guys usually ends up, you know, with them, and they kind of end up with each other, or she settles. I guess he's kind of settling, but if that's the best he can get, then maybe it's not. And he does his best to please her, but she's probably never pleased by him. Probably why the divorce rate's so high.
So is it fair to impose these delusional rich alpha male standards upon all men and shame those who don't conform?
I feel like you should try your hardest to be you and be the best you can be, but not for women.
You gotta have game, but you can't be like too thirsty.
Why are men shamed for being thirsty when women created the drought?
We didn't create a drought.
Don't women decide who gets sex?
I mean, I guess you could kind of argue that. You could say that.
Are men more thirsty for sex, or are women more thirsty for attention?
I think men, because y'all pay for like OnlyFans and shit like that.
It's crazy how much money some of them are making, and it feeds back into the cycle of a woman thinking like that they probably don't want to get into a relationship or a marriage early when it's probably better for both people. Instead, they'd rather try to get as much OnlyFans money as they can. And men also caught in the cycle of being lonely and then not being able to get the woman that they want end up going this masturbatory route where they're paying OnlyFans girls to do that. And it makes you wonder, like, okay, well, if prostitution was legal, would they be paying the OnlyFans girls? Would they be making as much money as them? You know what I mean? Would the OnlyFans girls be making as much money as a prostitute, where these guys ostensibly who can't get laid would go and procure their services? Would they be as thirsty?
Most men are just need it more than women do.
Are women more prone to teasing or pleasing men?
I'd say teasing.
I definitely agree with that. A woman will definitely tease you for like the ego rush.
There's a lot of thirst traps online, nowadays.
Like, all a woman got to do is go on like Instagram, Twitter, social media, period, and just post some fire ass pictures, and then they're gonna have all kind of dudes all in their inbox. Like, you have a female shaking her ass, and then have like 1,000 dudes like watching that video, and out of those 1,000 dudes, I'm pretty sure at least half of them probably like in her inbox.
Yeah, and I mean, so they can do that, and then they can use all that attention to kind of validate for themselves, like, hey, I'm a very sought after, desirable woman. This is why other high value guys, quote unquote, should like me. But the other part of that is if you get with someone like that, or you sign a state government contract, which will force you to simp, especially after the relationship is over. It's called spousal support. They are so puffed up by that even in the relationship with you, if you do one thing that they don't like, it's very easy for them to remember, if I post a thirst trap, there's going to be all these dudes in my inbox. So that kind of like puts you in this position where you have like the sword of Damocles above you that can just crush you at any moment. And a lot of guys are out here walking on eggshells.
Why are men shamed for being thirsty when men are typically the ones expected to pursue women?
That's a really, damn. If we're expected to pursue, why are we being ashamed for the pursuit?
Because men are the ones who sit here and do things that are very disgusting to women, as far as getting rejected. They will tell you that you're beautiful one moment, and then they will bash you, and they will do certain things just because they think you're beautiful. They also believe that what you're wearing justifies who you are. They are incapable of emotion and understanding emotion. They think logically and they think physically. So because it's not coinciding with what their beliefs are, they get angry and they get aggressive.
They get angry and aggressive. That's true. I mean, someone who's typically, I think if a guy's invested a lot of time into trying to get a woman, and then she rejects him or whatever, there tends to be a little bit more resentment there. Women do the same thing, except on the back end, like when they find out the guy doesn't want to marry them, or he's just basically like, yeah, I can't do this, but we've had a great relationship for 6 years. You're amazing. I really hope you find the person that's for you. It's just not me. That's when women lose their minds and, starts to become the crazy ex, where you wake up and your car is keyed, or they go for the, the public defamation, where they start reaching out to all your friends and social circle to tell them how much of a bad guy you are and how you use them.
Do you think you'll ever make it to the top 5%? And if so, how long do you think it will take?
No either, but who knows? Maybe we can go to top 15 or 10.
I'm not 6 foot, so I can't be in the top 10%.
I actually really, really like that question. That's a great question, because so much of the manosphere, Fresh and Fit, Andrew Tate, all these guys are selling Rolo, are selling the high value man narrative. That's what's taken over. It's about hyper performing, self-improving, but improving to this degree of level that's like borders on narcissism. You know what I mean? Like, you just keep going to an almost unhealthy degree. And it's actually, I would like to see more people ask that question, because I think a lot of people watch these shows and they see like the whatever podcast or the Fresh and Fit guy kind of dunk on one of these, modern women. And it's funny, but the people that are watching the show are just the average guy. They're not the high value guys with the YouTube channel or the cars or whatever. But they watch those shows because it's almost masturbatory for them. Like, they, that phrase where people are like, most people vote for interests of the rich here in the US because they feel like they're temporarily embarrassed millionaires instead of just normal people who probably will never be a millionaire. This is kind of like the same thing. Like, the guys that are super into this high value narrative feel like, well, I'm a high value guy, I just haven't gotten there yet. And when it finally happens, then then great. You know, all this lifestyle is going to apply to me. And I love how he's just like, well, I'm not 6 feet. It's just so funny because in a way, he kind of matter-of-factly just highlights how pointless the sort of narcissistic pursuit of becoming, you know, super high value in order to appease some narcissistic, toxic women with unbelievably high standards. And it's just sort of pointless. And it's like, what's the point of becoming so freaking high value that you end up just being forced to simp for this woman, you know, once she screws you over in divorce court, once you become that really ripe apple to just pick, and now all of a sudden you're financing the rest of her life. Maybe your kids aren't even yours, but they're over 2 years old in California, and it's too bad. You're the dad. Somebody's got to pay, and it's going to be you.
He presented the magistrate with the DNA findings. The magistrate said, somebody got to take care of him, referring to the child, and it's going to be you, and gavelled him out.
It begs into question what men should be focusing on, and when this narrative of self-improvement starts to become almost toxic for us.
It would be nice, but reality is I probably won't reach it. I mean, having money is a pretty good value to have, right?
Having money is a great value to have. That's true, but knowing how to deal with women, I think, is something men should have before they have money. You know, I used to work at the child support agency here in Sacramento. Like, believe me, I see how the system forces guys to simp. If you have trouble getting with women and you make a bunch of money and then you start to get with women, if you've never learned how to deal with them, you're just going to be a high value target that ends up getting screwed over. And honestly, even the people who get women before and then make a bunch of money, they're still in this kind of problem that they need to solve. It's like, why does the passport bros even exist? Even Andrew Tate himself has to be in Romania or Dubai. It's not like these guys can get rich here and then all of a sudden they just get married and all this, and they don't, you know, got to get worried. They don't have to be worried about being baby trapped or ending up in the system or getting Me Too'd. These guys end up leaving. So it kind of also highlights the fact that becoming high value doesn't exactly solve these problems for you. And I remember as a child support officer in Sacramento, I read thousands of divorce orders. And I remember thinking that society, like when I used to sit in my cubicle working these cases, I just remember thinking in my mind, society really punishes guys that become successful over here.
So how is telling men that they need to become high value not just shaming all the average men who can't make it to the top 5%?
I think any man can make it to success, but not stereotypical top 5%.
It kind of reminds me of the Barbie movie, you know, and their main issue for the ladies was that there was this impossibly high beauty standard to match that's represented by Barbie as a monolith, you know. But most women are not going to achieve that. And this high value narrative is basically the same for men, right? It's kind of like that Barbie monolith. I mean, most guys aren't realistically going to achieve that. And it puts a lot of unnecessary pressure on your life to try to do that. I mean, I think it's great to improve as much as you can. I mean, like, hey, you know, don't be out of shape. Don't be broke. That's fine. But at a certain point, it's like you shouldn't need to have all these other things and basically become a celebrity, you know, astronaut, cowboy, millionaire on the moon in order to get chicks. So it starts to border on ridiculous.
I think that's been popularized by media a lot. I think like if you're not a good-looking man that owns a fucking tower in Manhattan or something, you're not gonna get the prettiest woman on the block, right? But I like to think that people still fall in love with character more than anything.
If sex wasn't a need, wouldn't men boycott these women rather than be forced to simp for them?
Yeah.
I think if sex wasn't a need, yeah, probably a bunch of guys would opt out.
Yeah.
So then
you probably wouldn't want to deal with a lot of us.
So then isn't that men are simping because they're forced to?
You said they're forced to?
Yeah.
No, I just think a lot of guys are thirsty.
People are going to have this natural rejection of the idea of being forced to simp because simp is used as this kind of like whip. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're simping. And other guys will do that to other men also, you know, like the guy at the bottom of the totem pole really takes most of the abuse. Like, you're going to get shamed for wanting sex from women. And then if you're not good enough and it's a problem and you're trying to let out these emotions, the self-improvement guru's going to basically be like, well, you know, it's your fault. You're not good enough. You're a simp. And it's used as a kind of like shaming tactic, basically, to shame you into compliance and to go with the whole self-improvement narrative.
We typically want a woman for sex, in all honesty, you know. But I mean, if we didn't want sex, or if sex wasn't an option, then yeah, we wouldn't really be doing the things we do for a woman.
Why will women often withhold sex when men have a stronger biological need for sex than women?
Control. Kind of power.
Because women want to see if that's all that a guy is looking for.
But the thing about that is that doesn't explain the men who are in marriages that are providing, taking care of their kids, you know, mowing the lawn, getting the oil change in the car, changing the light bulbs, going to work every day, paying for the food. Why would a woman then withhold sex against that guy? Is it because she's unsure that that's all he wants?
Should men withhold attention and resources when men are unhappy with women?
No, that'd be fucked up.
A man can't really withhold attention and resources. The first woman in the video said that she'd just go find another man. But in a marriage situation, if a man starts withholding attention and resources, all she needs to do is go to the family law court, and then the relationship's going to end. She doesn't have to do anything for the man, you know, iron shirts or have sex, and that guy's going to be paying spousal support. So systemically, on so many levels, not even just culturally, he's going to be forced to simp, you know, and her first instinct is like, that's really messed up. But it's like, well, isn't it messed up to withhold intimacy from your partner if you know that that's what they need and want from you?
Didn't women set the terms that they needed to be served and put on a pedestal, which created simping in the first place?
Absolutely. They were watching the talk shows and they give them all this BS and they buy into it. It's exactly what they want to hear.
If sex wasn't a need for men, how would women as a standard manipulate men through sex?
That's a good question. I don't know what they would do because men, more and more of my friends want nothing to do with women anymore.
Why are men expected to bring more to the table than they ever have in order to please women who bring less to the table than they ever have?
Isn't that chivalry?
Like that old school mindset, like, oh, like the man got to do this, the man got to protect the house, the man should be the provider, woo, woo, woo. But it's like we're not living in those times. Like your feet work, your hands work. Like, you know what I'm saying? You can get money just like we get money. Let's both get a bag.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's like the major underlying problem here is that men are expected to still fulfill the role of a traditional man, while women at the same time are not expected to fulfill the role of a traditional woman. So the advice men are currently receiving is to become even more of a traditional man in order to get the woman who's not fulfilling her traditional role. Like, that's the advice. Like, become a hyper traditional man, you know, get so many resources that you can provide for so many like different women many times over, get so much status and power and all these things. And that goes into the self-improvement dogma, you know? So on the one side, guys get these red pill self-improvement guys like the Andrew Tates who just want you to sign up for Hustlers University. And then on the other side, there's the tradcons, right? The tradcons are like Matt Walsh, you know, he had a video talking about how it's still worth it to go after marriage, even with the current culture that we're in, even though you have to take this huge risk where over half marriages fail. And it's like, they don't have a sufficient answer, you know, in order for what men are supposed to do in order to deal with this. It's just, we'll go dig deeper and deeper and deeper into this, become a higher value target, just try to, you know, dig yourself into traditionalism, and traditionalism isn't going to work. Hyper self-improving isn't going to work. What is going to work is changing family laws, redefining masculinity, and trying to get out of this to where you are forced to simp, to where you're not. I mean, there's laws, you know, I could just think of changing off the top of my head. If you find out your kid's not yours, you should be able to have first right to say, hey, delegitimize this child. I do not want to be the legal parent of this child or have obligations for this child. And then that puts the kid back out in the cold, and mom then has to go after the actual father. They have genetic tests now. She should be able to do this, you know? And if that guy's in jail and can't provide, well, mom, you should have chose better. And then other women will learn from this. Second one, I think there should be caps on spousal and child support. No kid, especially in Sacramento County, needs $7,000 a month in order to survive. No woman needs $12,000 a month in a spousal support order in order to survive here, creating a $19,000, or if you're David Garibaldi, a $20,000 a month order for spousal and child, whatever the breakdown was. You know, it's like, get a freaking 2-bedroom apartment on a normal average side of town, and here's your $5,000 a month. That's it. That's all you need. The other half of the time, when kid's with dad, then he's going to get more because dad can provide that. Those are two things that should actually happen. Updates to the paternity laws, updates to marriage, to child and spousal support. And this would redefine what it means to get married. More people might be more likely to then go into that. Other than that, marriage currently is on life support.
Women bring more to the table now, and I think that because women have had less standards for men, they have known that, you know what? Like, men are not going to do it. We're going to do it for ourselves. And that has made men lazy. And men have actually survived off women nowadays. So that is definitely a false statement. Men should work harder because they are stronger. They are faster. They have more abilities than we do. They need to do more.
I don't know what she's talking about men surviving off women. Maybe there's like one, 6'5" Andrew Tate who had 4 girlfriends, before he became rich and convinced 2 of them to webcam, for him and started all that. But most of these guys out here are not living off women, but women will not look twice at them. And looking at all these divorce orders and who's paying the majority of spousal support and all these things, it's actually the other way around.
Women are making a little bit more than men nowadays, so that's why we have to step our game up and really provide and bring more to the table.
If we accept that women are living life on easy mode, why are we not trying to change that rather than tell men to step their game up to appease these toxic women?
I feel like it's a question of perspective. I think whatever the provider of the house does should be appreciated, and that's all the payment that they need.
So the provider of the house should be appreciated, okay? But there's nothing institutionally that's going to make that happen. Yeah, they should be. That's called, being the man of the house, and your family's appreciative for supporting them and taking care of them. But nowadays, that's just not the case. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many men out there that do even more. They will provide for the house and come in and do all the housework and the cooking, and then still have no respect from their wives. They'll still get divorced, and that's the appreciation that they're going to get. There's nothing institutionally that can give men an out for that. If a man's not getting appreciated, he now has to do this cost-benefit analysis of, is it worth going through the divorce and getting raked over the coals, especially if you're the provider. Okay, so you have to put up with this disrespect from your wife, and it's essentially being forced to be a simp. What else is it?
I'd say women are relatively more social creatures in general, and men are more competitive in nature. So that probably makes it easier that men trying to step through the game rather than changing how the society works.
Many women today say they don't need a man, they want a man. They don't need a man to provide for her material needs, yet men still need a woman to fulfill his sexual needs. Shouldn't men also have the option to say they don't need a woman, they want a woman, so that both sexes can be on a level playing field?
I want a woman, I don't need a woman because I can do all the things by myself. I can spend my own money by myself, I make my own money by myself, I can honestly please myself. But I want a woman for those extra things, of course, physical things, and that affection, that I can't give myself. Nowadays, I feel like most women don't need a man because they can do all it. these things themselves, even also pleasing themselves. They feel like they can do things by using a toy or whatnot that cause them to detach themselves from needing a man. But in all honesty, I think we do need each other.
What, back in the day, women really had to like keep themselves together, you know, to really appeal, to be able to attract a man, and you know, in a way they felt like it was like oppressing them, like keeping them down, like they were subservient to a man. And in today's day and age, the roles are kind of reversed, and it's not balanced.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree with them there. The pendulum has swung so far in the opposite direction that men are essentially subservient to women now. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, I mean, to be forced to pay child support for a kid that's not biologically yours, and just being forced to have to deal with that is a form of oppression. There's no other way to slice that, you know? And it's like women don't need a man if there's a system that allows them to oppress a man in that way, you know? So there's no give and take here at this table. It's just take.
It's not right. It's not fair.
Life isn't fair. We are all given lemons and we're all given a lot of things. We have to deal with what we have. At the end of the day, men can sit here and cry and say that, hey, I don't have this and we need this, we need that. But you know what? Step up, be the man that a woman needs, and find someone that suits your needs, and that's it.
You know, she makes it sound so simple, but it's just unfortunately not working out for a lot of guys. I mean, and it's, for her, maybe it would work that way. Just all these different guys hitting you up, just find one of them that suits your needs. But for a man, I mean, you're barely getting any matches on the apps. You know, you're expected to provide all these things, and then you're hoping that like she doesn't just leave you after a few years when the kid's 3 or 4, and then you're on the hook for a lot of stuff. So it's not as easy as she makes that seem.
Men have a higher sex drive, and I hear it a lot that women say, I don't need a man, but I'd like to have a man, and I tell them to go down to the pound and get a puppy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Buy a dog and die alone.
Yeah, exactly. Buy a dog and die an old lady all by yourself.
You know, both men and women will end up losing here if we both end up alone. And, you know, I had people tell me that it's more likely that men will end up alone. And I mean, maybe that's true statistically. I don't know. Though I will say if a man ends up alone, it's less shameful than if a woman ends up alone. Because if a man with barely any options ends up alone, well, it's like, all right, it's easy to see how that happened. But if a woman with a bunch of options ends up alone, you have to ask yourself, like, what the heck happened there? Anyways, that was a great video. Check out It's Complicated channel. And it gives us a lot to think about. You know, it's like, what do you as a guy do in this situation of being forced to simp? I think a lot of guys will say, like, well, you're not forced to simp. You can choose not to. But choosing not to essentially just means that you're stepping out of the game, right? And, well, okay, I'm just not going to participate. But when you step back into it, then you have to deal with all these problems. And, you know, there's understanding game, how to get this, how to get that. But overall, in the long term, there's a lot of, simping being forced here. And, you know, there's different solutions. The one I really want to see is change in family law. You know, I think child support, family law, paternity law needs a huge overhaul. And I hope to see the political will for this someday. Most of this energy is being concentrated into men just trying to fulfill a traditional role to an even greater extent than they ever did before, trying to become, you know, self-improve to another level of narcissism. And I think most of that energy can be moved over to changing some of these laws, you know, whether it's family law or whether or not you think even making prostitution legal would help. I don't know if it will. I mean, if you're not the pimp in that situation, then you're probably the simp. I mean, if you're handing over money. But hey, it might be worth it to some guys to avoid, you know, the simping so hard you end up in a marriage you shouldn't be in. So, you know, those can be debated. My real axe to grind here definitely centers around the family law. And I 100% will agree that men are forced to simp by, you know, those very laws. And we need to figure this out, or a lot of guys are just going to choose to not participate in the game, and they're not going to want to contribute. So anyways, let me know what you think. Leave your comments down below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're almost to 1,000 subs. I'm at like 967. Do want to say thank you to all those who have subbed, and we're going to keep trying to move this train forward. So we'll see you on the next one.